Welcome to Association Chat. We are here. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm so excited that you're here because we have an excellent episode for you today. But if you haven't been here before, let me tell you about Association Chat. Association Chat is where we warm ourselves by the virtual fire, welcoming thought leaders and trailblazers alike to join up in this online home for the association community. I'm the host of Association Chat, Kiki L'Italienne, and if 2020 was anything, it was about reinvention. Oh my gosh, we reinvented the way that we sent our kids to school. We reinvented the way that we ordered our groceries. We reinvented the way that we checked in with a doctor. And it became clear that things were never going to be quite the same again. And so it is with live events. But what does that mean for live events today? And what could that mean for the live events that we have in the future? With us today is Marco Giberti. He's the co-author of the book Reinventing Live that just came out. I think it was late last year, early this year. It was very, very recent. And because of that, I am so honored to have him on the show today. Welcome, Marco.
Thank you for having me.
Did I butcher your last name or did I pronounce it correctly?
Perfect. Giberti. It's very difficult, I know, for American people, but you did a great job.
Thank you. I was really, once I got to that part, I was like, that was one question I should have asked. But as we get started today, I thought we might kick things off by talking about some of the differences we really have seen in live events. Now, people who have read a little bit about your background in the run-up to today's show, maybe they've read the show notes if they're listening to this later in the podcast. They know that you have quite an interesting background going into events and your interest in events. And you can speak to that certainly if you feel like you want to speak to it. But my first question has to do with what's changed. We've seen live events really sort of, obviously with people not being able to be right there in person, face to face, that was a big thing. But what else has changed?
Well, many things. I think that you mentioned in your introduction, we changed the way that we interact with work, education, medicine, finance, and so many things. And this is not new. It's not COVID related. It's happening for a long time, but COVID accelerated the whole engagement and speed of change. My background is a combination between technology, media, and live events, which means I was able to understand changes from a pretty traumatic way, particularly on the media. On my media career, I started with B2B media, and we sold our media company to Pearson many years ago. On the tech front, I worked with Apple in my early days, and I quit Apple to start an events company, a trade show company. I started with tech shows, coming from my geek Apple roots, and I built a portfolio of events that ultimately was acquired by Reed Exhibitions after a long joint venture with them. I'm around events for almost 3 decades, which means I saw some interesting changes, but honestly, nothing like what we saw during the last year. And I honestly believe when I sold my company to Reed, I started my new company, Vesuvio, which is now more than 10 years old. And my thesis was, it seems that I understand media and live events as an operator. I was in my early 40s and I was thinking, I don't want to run another startup again. I did it 3 times from scratch to exit. But I want to invest time or money or both, helping founders building interesting technologies in order to accelerate change in the media and live events industries, and education as well, because it was part of my events experience in the past. And I was lucky to invest and participate in some very exciting technology ventures during the last decade, but I was always frustrated with speed and how slow was the adoption and engagement from event organizers or media companies or associations or corporate organizers into technology. And what I saw in the last year and a half, it's unbelievable, because it's really opening tremendous opportunities and challenges in the industry that I believe that are going to change the whole landscape during the next 5 or 10 years, which means I think that the change that the industry saw in the last 100 plus year was absolutely nothing in comparison with the change that we saw in the last year, and the changes that this year unlearning will be triggering into the next 5 or 10 years.
I know that we've seen a lot of change, and I've already, once more and more people became vaccinated, and there was this idea of folks coming back into meeting face to face. There is a component of people out there who are, talking about it being back to normal and going back to the way things used to be. And what do you have to say? What do you have to say to that?
Well, I will ask you if you will be going back to normal in all those verticals that we discussed before, medicine, education, finance, and others. I think that we're going to live a new, what I call a hybrid world, which is it's not about hybrid events. It's about a hybrid world. People will be thinking twice on which specific things will be necessary to do face to face, and which specific things could be done on a digital way. And that mindset is going to trigger new decisions and investment decisions from companies and from visitors into events and from every single stakeholder around the industry. I keep joking that 3 days was never enough for one event. The value proposition from an event should be way broader than that. I wrote a blog post a couple of months ago, and the title was Events as Platforms. And the whole idea was, I went back to school. I did a Harvard Business School seminar for a full week about digital platforms. And it basically blew my mind, because I was thinking, as a recovering event organizer all the time, how can we learn from digital platforms from a live events perspective? And if you think from a simple way, an event should be way more than 3 days. And with Denzel, my co-author, we keep saying those signs that says "see you next year" should basically disappear. They should be forbidden, because if our value proposition as an industry is just a couple of days, it's not enough. And the whole concept of a platform, of a digital platform, could and should be a fantastic opportunity for associations, event organizers, media owners, in order to engage with their audience on a way more relevant basis. And this is a fantastic business opportunity. And it's the way that event organizers should think about the future. We say at the book, you shouldn't consider yourself an event organizer. You should consider yourself a community catalyst. And we honestly believe that that's the way that a real event should engage with their industry and should help their industry.
Well, and I've seen that that quote elsewhere. I haven't had a chance to read the book, but I am going to read it. I'm patiently waiting for my copy. But I have to say, this idea of being a catalyst for community. Community is such a hot topic right now, especially as people look at these events as being an opportunity for bringing people together and keeping them connected. And I think that the reason why is because even though many of us were beating that drum for years and years and years, it wasn't until there wasn't an option. It wasn't until people were absolutely not able to get together in person that there became this concern, like especially in the association space, this concern of, oh my gosh, well, if they're not going to connect at the annual meeting, then how are they going to feel like they're part of a community? And that's when there is like this, we really need to pay attention, And by the way, for anyone who's watching this, check out the link at the bottom of the screen. This is a little bit.ly link so that you can go directly over to Amazon and buy the book, Reinventing Live.
Well, let me say something that I keep discussing with friends around the events industry. And I honestly think that change was not fast because life was pretty good before COVID for the events industry, which means good events were growing double digit, margins were fat and healthy, and life was pretty good, which means the anxiety or urgency for engaging with complex things like community engagement, digital platforms, event technology was not super urgent or a priority. It was a nice thing to have, and some event organizers associations were doing a pretty good job learning and engaging with these tools. But if they were doing a pretty good job on the classic value proposition, that was beautiful.
Yeah.
When COVID hit, we all realized, as you said, that if we don't meet face to face in Vegas during our event, we're going to lose a significant part of that connection. And we all realized that probably it's time to rethink and reinvent the whole model. And that's why when we were with Densil together, that I guess that it was March 2020, and we saw that this whole COVID thing will be bigger than expected. We discussed, what if we put some ideas together and we go and talk with some smart people around the industry, investors, owners, founders, event organizers, and we brainstorm about what's next. And it was a fantastic 6 months cycle, talking with different stakeholders and different views, and we showcase some concrete case studies. If when you read the book, you will see that we talk on a very granular way about case studies and examples. And the first thing that we say is, number one, we don't own a crystal ball. We don't know what is going to happen. We are sharing our own ideas, and we're talking with very smart and successful people that they were generous to share their own views. But this is go back to the Wild West days in many ways, and we need to rethink the whole model. One of the phrases that I keep repeating in all these conversations is, it's a Star Wars phrase from Yoda. When he's teaching Luke Skywalker, he said, you have to unlearn and learn again. And when I saw that, I'm a big Star Wars fan. When I saw the movie, I thought, well, this is exactly what our industry needs. We need to unlearn and learn again. We need to be humble enough to say, if I have 3 decades of experience around live events, it means absolutely nothing, because this industry is ready for change. And I see a lot of successful people around our industry, which in many ways they're outsiders. They have only a couple of years of experience, but they're coming with a fresh mindset into the live events industry. They're building super successful events and digital platforms and digital communities way faster than the classic players, that they are basically repeating a model year after year for a couple of decades. And I believe that if you want to be relevant in this industry, you have to unlearn and learn. If you are around like me for 2-3 decades, or even if you are coming from a different industry, you will need to understand the specific needs that this industry is going to require to event organizers, brands, or stakeholders, because expectations are going to be different. And I see that as an opportunity and as a good thing.
Well, and we have people commenting. A Facebook user said, "What's normal and why do we want it anymore anyway?" And then Rachel, hi Rachel, said, "It's a reset. It's a reset. That's what we're in right now." And one of the things I was going to bring up a quote. You're very quotable. I was going to bring up a quote I found that somebody had posted to Twitter. Events are no longer isolated from innovation, acceleration, and change. And I wanted to just ask you about this and to say, well, why do you think that they were isolated in the beginning, and what's to keep them from becoming that way now?
I think that we were isolated because we were pretty successful as a way to put buyers and sellers together if it's B2B. And because of that, exhibitors were reasonably happy and visitors were okay and speakers and everyone was okay with events. But if you analyze the real numbers and stats, NPS in our industry was pretty low, which means the real data was saying exhibitors were not delighted with events or visitors. And as an organizer, I remember endless conversations with exhibitors asking me, how can I measure my return of investment on events? And our answers were pretty gray answers. There is no way to measure return on live events in comparison with digital investments, for example. And a new generation of marketing people, what I call the Google generation, was born and raised and trained analyzing every single detail on return of investments. And that generation is now saying to event organizers, associations, and everyone, hey, I'm investing a couple of $100,000 in your show. Where is this return coming? It's not about leads anymore. It's significantly deeper than that, which means I believe that we were pretty isolated because things were reasonably good. But when we start looking into other industries and when we see the media example, for example, I keep saying, if you're reading a newspaper on an iPad today, you will understand how dramatic was the user interface change during the last decade in comparison with reading a paper, magazine, or newspaper. And events were more or less the same. You were flying to Vegas, visiting a show, interacting with people, a little bit of serendipity, some exposure to technology, but nothing dramatic. I think that now our exposure to technology is dramatic. We all have billions of people were trained on what I call a Zoom crash course during the last year.
Right.
And when we learn the power on that potential interaction, we will be, again, rethinking, should I really fly from Singapore to Vegas and spend a whole week, a lot of money, time for 3 or 4 meetings and 3 or 4 keynotes, or I can probably rethink the way that I will interact with that community.
Well, and let's talk about community, because there it is again. You know, community has been this really hot word that it's being thrown. I'm seeing it thrown, and I'm very sensitive to this because community has been such a big part of what I do in my world for so long. That now all of a sudden it is the special sauce. Every single tech solution has community built in. Every single tech, there's like some sort of special sauce of community that's being offered. And so I'm curious about what you see as being sort of the goal, you know, what we're really aiming for when we're talking about community with live events. What's working and what's not? What's maybe something where it's like, hey, this is a false flag, you know, like watch out for something that's being called something it isn't, being called community.
I first of all, I think that events and communities should do a good job together. And from a mindset perspective, as I said before, I shouldn't be thinking on show X. I should be thinking on community X. And how do I want to interact with that community? I think that technology is just a tool, but the real community engagement is going to happen based on specific value proposition from that community to their members. And as a community owner, you have to set those expectations extremely well. And the complexity about connecting buyers and sellers on a B2B world is massive, which means I think that some event organizers, they have brand permission for that particular community as event organizers. And there is nothing wrong with that. But that community is not going to believe that that event organizer is going to be doing a fantastic job on a digital platform or on a B2B digital community or marketplace, which means that's why you see companies like Informa analyzing partnership with digital platforms like New Order. It's because they're different animals. There are different management skills, learnings, and brand permission from that community, from those communities, in terms of I'm visiting this show, I'm visiting this conference, or I'm participating in this digital marketplace. And that's a challenge, but also it's a massive opportunity for associations. Let's talk about associations, which seems to be an important part of your audience. I'm talking with associations for a long, long time. As a show organizer, I partner with associations all the time. I think that associations are struggling to rethink their own model as a community engagement opportunity for their members. And it's normal because, of course, events, it's a big part of their model and their value proposition. But on the other side, if you want to be part of a successful association as a member, buyer or seller, you want to extract significantly more value than just a couple of days conference or trade show or whatever. And that value is going to be coming from a better connection between that buyer and seller. And that better connection is going to happen, like it or not, through a digital platform. Because the digital platform is going to allow the buyer and seller to extract data that is going to make that connection more valuable. And let me translate into a simple example. If I'm going to a show and I'm investing $50,000 building my booth, sending my people, preparing the show, and I come back to the office with a couple of hundred leads, and I know the lead conversion during the next 3 to 6 months, we all know how it works. And if the show is great, it's going to be better. And if the show was not so great, it's going to be a little bit more depressing. But if I'm thinking and rethinking my marketing investment on a way that I can capture data all year long and activate those meetings, potentially on a virtual meeting like this, but moving into a face-to-face meeting as part of the show, that's where my specific marketing goal as a seller, as an investor, a brand that is participating in your community is going to change. And if you own that community and you're facilitating those connections, the way that you think on helping that buyer and seller to connect is going to change dramatically, because they could connect potentially on a webinar with breakout rooms and one-to-one meetings, all virtual from their house or office, and cost marginal or zero. And they can pre-qualify those meetings and connections and conversations for a face-to-face VIP experience at the right time, at the right place. And if you talk with Founders 2.0, with people that are creating these communities from scratch right now, their mindset is digital first, face-to-face after that. And they're capturing data on a digital basis as much as they can, understanding that data and activating face-to-face connections at the right time, at the right place. Yeah. And if you see the growth on some of those communities, it's quite spectacular. And events is just a small part of the value proposition. But the other interactions are critical in order to generate trust and engagement on those communities' stakeholders.
I mean, by the way, I just want to just make a note here for anyone who's watching that while we're talking about live events and this sort of broad idea of community and connection, it sounds like maybe what Marco might be saying or what I might be saying and talking about using these digital components, that has to do with like tracking and measuring and all of that stuff. And it does. But also, in addition to that, the ability to have this ongoing connection and conversation, the ease with which you can connect with someone else. And I'll also say that on the education side of it, some of the training and workshops that have been done, I have talked with other people, and I myself have experienced this, where because of that ability to gather and collect what people are doing within a workshop, because of that ability to add that digital component, it allows you to quickly do things that you wouldn't be able to do if you were just using like a flip chart in a room physically. And so because of that, there are those things where, we're changing the way that we do things even when we're face-to-face, incorporating a digital component, because we've discovered there's just a better way. And I want to put that out there because, I really feel like there are some people who see this as an either-or kind of thing. And I think even when we're talking about meeting in person, for instance, I'm getting ready to go do a keynote. One of the pieces is going to incorporate a digital component because it works so well in a way, and quickly, in a way that nothing else does. So I just want to put that out there, as it's not a replacement for necessarily, it's just a new way of doing something.
I keep talking about an augmented TAM. When you're an investor, the first thing that you analyze before investing your money into a company is how big is the TAM, the total addressable market for that opportunity. And as you know, events as a category is a pretty big TAM. It's a multi-trillion-dollar industry if you take into consideration B2B, sports, music festival. It's a massive TAM, and that's why private equity and investors were always very attractive into the industry, and we see as an industry a lot of capital coming into the space. And I keep saying now that we have an augmented TAM because we still have that face-to-face total addressable market, which is massive, and it's coming back, very fast and very strong. But on top of that, we have the virtual and hybrid TAM. And if you put all those things together, now it's a very, very attractive industry. And that's why you see those crazy valuations of event technology companies happening lately. It's not because investors are stupid. They see the opportunity. They see a massive opportunity. And some players are going to capture a nice market share on that opportunity and become multi-billion-dollar companies in the next 5 or 10 years. And from the organizer perspective, they have the benefit of these very sophisticated investors and founders building amazing technologies very fast that they can use at reasonably affordable prices, to be honest with you, and capture that technology for their communities, for their shows, for their education opportunities. And I want to go back to the concept. If I'm an association with a successful show and brands events as part of my value proposition to my members, and now I want to rethink, okay, what's next in the next 5 or 10 years in order to keep my association, my brands relevant for my industry? I need to understand what is important for that industry and what is important for those stakeholders. In some communities or industries, education is critical. And education, as you said before, is very efficient on a virtual way. It's super efficient one-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-many, breakout rooms, keynotes, you name it. The platforms are working extremely well. And education could be very affordable and efficient on a digital or hybrid model. In some communities, matchmaking and connecting the buyer and seller into the one-to-one meeting is critical. Again, technology is growing extremely fast on that area, and the algorithm and data capture are allowing buyers and sellers to connect extremely well and efficiently on a virtual basis. In some communities, commerce is critical. And that's where the challenge happened. It's very, very difficult to replace a classic trade show with technology. Extremely difficult, and that's a long conversation, but nobody cracked the code yet. There are some interesting examples that the trade show experience on a virtual basis is not easy. Engagement is difficult, product demo is difficult, the human connection is necessary there, which means the way that I see associations, communities, event organizers, and B2B media learning extremely fast during the last couple of years is I need to understand how I capture engagement from my community, what is important for them, how I can use digital in a way to facilitate that engagement and provide and add value, and which specific topics are not going to be able to run on a digital way. Again, think what could be done on a digital way and it's efficient and it works, and what will need to be done face-to-face. And I honestly believe that face-to-face is not going away. Face-to-face build trust. Trust is critical for commerce or B2B relationships. And face-to-face will continue to play a very relevant role. And companies are going to pay a lot of money for that, but it's not enough.
Yeah. I mean, I saw a group that had started getting together virtually when COVID hit, and it was in the association space. And it's a group that a friend of mine, Nicole, she convenes in the mornings. It's like a coffee group. They meet over Zoom. And over the months, as these meetings have continued to have recently, they decided, of course, what are they going to do? They're going to meet in person, right, and have coffee together in DC because that's what we do as humans. We want to come together, and it helps to sort of solidify and celebrate the community that we create with other people. It's just like in the beginning of social media. We all kind of want to end up meeting at some point together. But then we can't do that all the time, can we? We can't
Absolutely.
do it all the time. And so it's those in between times. How do you bring people together in between? How do you bring people together when they can't meet in person? And I think that that's really it. I love what you said about the augmented approach, where you start thinking about your live meetings or just really anything as being augmented, right, by digital, because I do think that I really believe that that's kind of where we're headed anyway. Recently interviewed Vivian Chan, who of Next Tech, AR, and she was talking about the same sort of thing, where it's becoming easier and easier, less expensive and less expensive, more intuitive for people to bring this in and make it a useful part of their lives. And I think if we could get everyone using Zoom for the past year and a half to figure out how to begin meeting, through video and learning through video, what will happen when we start, checking out as a large group, as a society, other types of technology?
Yeah, but if you think from a very pragmatic way, I talk about a hybrid world that we're going to be living. We're already living that world, and we're experiencing that on a regular basis. Or sometimes I said we're going to be living a phygital world where physical and digital is going to be blended all the time. But this is not new. This is already happening in e-commerce, of course, the gaming industry. The gaming industry is years ahead of the trade show industry or the events industry. Those guys are leading the pack in so many levels. And if you're curious about it, take a look on what esports companies and gaming companies are doing with community engagement. I have kids, when they're playing with their own friends online on a game, it's an experience. It's a community in many ways. If you see what Twitch did in the gaming world, esports, it's a massive community, and now activating massive live events in parallel, which means we don't need to reinvent the wheel here. We need to learn from the gaming industry, the retail industry, the e-commerce industry, and try to understand how could I translate some of those experiences into my community, into my industry. And I remember when I started organizing trade shows after quitting Apple, and I started my own tech events, I was on my mid-20s, and my competitors were my age, mid-50s. And their way to compete with us, we were a bunch of kids building new events where these kids, they don't get it. They have no experience. We have 25 years of experience. And my pitch to my team was they don't have 25 years of experience. They have 1 year repeated 25 times. They're doing the same every single year. They're doing the same. There is no innovation. There is nothing new over there, which means I don't think that it's about age or experience. I see amazing people innovating on their 70s, and I see people not innovating or moving fast on their 20s. I think that it's a cultural mindset. It's about being bold and brave and say, you know what, I'm going to be out of my comfort zone and trying something new or different. And let's be honest, I was asked on a different event the other day, what do I think about the Informas or Reed of this world? Are they going to be able to catch up and innovate fast? And I think that your audience know those brands are large event organizers. And I'm coming from one of them. I spent 12 years on a joint venture with Reed, and I know the good, bad, and ugly of being part of those massive organizations. And my 2 cents is that they could be able to reinvent their business, but it's not easy because they're bringing legacy assets and events that are 20 or 30 years old with a model that is not easy to change. But is that impossible to change? Absolutely not. And we're starting to see some specific examples on legacy events reinventing their value proposition to that particular industry. Now, on the other side, if you are an entrepreneur, this is a fantastic time to be around this industry because you're going to be able to build very, very exciting models, which are going to be a combination between digital plus, again, phygital sort of approach where you can mix physical interactions and digital interactions. And you're going to be able to provide value to your community on a way that it was extremely difficult to do a couple of years ago. I'm not saying a couple of decades ago, a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
A meeting like this a couple of years ago will be completely different. And a meeting like any virtual event a couple of years ago, it looks like, black and white. The improvement on the platform, on the way that people are connected online is dramatic.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely incredible. I think a lot of people get caught up in the frustration of what's not here yet, and they forget how much we've progressed in a very short amount of time. Where there were some people who were just like, I remember running into someone, a couple of months ago who it was their first time on Zoom. And I thought this may be the very last time I ever run into that again. I mean, even my 83-year-old mother has been on Zoom, right? So I feel like, and she's in Southwest Missouri, I'm telling you, like if she's been on Zoom, like everyone's been on Zoom. And it's really something quite fantastic. I mean, if there's a silver lining, that must be one of them. My question to you is, where are your frustrations? I mean, it is exciting to see such dramatic change happen, but where are you saying, okay, don't stop now. We have to keep going. I mean, what are you getting frustrated with right now? Surely you have some.
Many. I honestly think that many organizers and community owners are still living on a denial mode, thinking that we're going back to normal again, and their business is going to look pretty much the same. And there is a chance that some communities, some geographies, some vertical industries are going to be like that, probably. I think that the risk on that assumption is crazy. I think that we have the chance during the next couple of years to be bold, reinventing the model, reinventing the value proposition, rethinking the revenue split, rethinking the way that we connect again those buyers and sellers. Not capitalizing that opportunity will be really sad, because every single stakeholder is open right now to innovation. The visitor, the speaker, the sponsor, the exhibitor, everyone, the general contractor, the vendors, the service providers, everyone is saying, how could and should reinvent my own business in order to survive and be relevant for my customers? And this includes, of course, venues. I don't know if venues is a part of your audience, but venues are pretty concerned because, a venue as a concept is changing. And now if you don't have your own studio inside the convention center or the hotel, probably some organizers are going to say, I'm going to be looking for a different space because I need to bring the digital component and the virtual component as part of my show. Now, I think that one of my frustrations with the industry, the events industry in general, was lack of sophistication from the event organizer using technologies. And as a guy that I understand the event organizer mindset because I'm coming from that world, but I also understand the geek mindset, coming and investing a lot of time dealing with technology people. I was always, and I'm still very frustrated with lack of communication between the software and the organizer. And the organizer is complaining with the software company saying they're geeks, they don't get it, they will never understand how an event is organized. And the software guy is saying they're dinosaurs, they don't get it, they will never understand how to use technology for their events. And probably there is some truth on both sides, because the organizer should do a more conscious and deep effort to understand technology and use technology. But the geeks should also think, okay, not everyone in the world is a coder or an engineer, and I need to make my product easier to use. Being pragmatic, I think that we're not going to see a self-service solution for software in the live event industry for a while, because software is still complex to use in many cases, and self-service is not there. I'm talking about big events. Probably on small events or meetings, it's a different game. But I understand that if your audience is organizing big events, you need service on top of that. And that's another massive opportunity. There are a new generation of agencies, digital agencies, providing service on top of the software and helping associations or event organizers to use that software and help your customers to do a better job. And that's a very, very important element in our industry, because it's not software as a service and the customer will do it. They need an additional service on top of that. And this is happening, and it's very, very exciting to see. The way that I believe that this is going to provide long-term and sustainable value is when associations or event organizers are finally able to monetize that community apart from the classic exhibit space and booth. And they are starting to see that the digital component is going to be relevant.
Yeah, I'm actually curious at what kind of creative ways have you seen the monetization part come in? Because I know there's the repackaging of content, there's the selling the replays, that type of stuff. But have you seen anything that you've thought, that's really clever? That's I think more people should look at that.
Yes, in the association world, I'm pretty interested and intrigued on the 365 approach, where basically the community stays live through a digital platform all year long. And that allows exhibitors or sellers to have a showroom that stays there all year long and upload content, product demos, and run meetings through that showroom. Some associations are already doing this for a while. And the Toy Association is a good example. They started doing this years ago, and now they have a lot of learnings and interesting assets for that particular industry. But there are many other associations building their own platforms. And again, each industry is going to be different. It's not the same, the poultry industry or the software industry. The dynamics, the buyer-seller need and connections are different. But trying to be simple, if you can generate a content engagement, and content could be a seminar, a keynote, or a product demo. For many industries, the product demo is critical, which means the product demo is super useful content for that community. And if you can activate that content on a digital basis, on a way that your seller is going to create their own showrooms and populate and activate those showrooms, there is a massive asset on that value proposition. And how are they monetizing associations, something like this? They charge the showroom all year long on a software basis. They hire agencies to help those customers to build their showrooms, because many of those brands and companies, they're lazy and they don't want to do it, or they don't know how to do it, which means they need help, which means agencies are an important part of the value proposition here. And I'm really excited to see that also some buyers are paying for that, which means they're monetizing sellers with showrooms, product demos, webinars, one-to-one meetings, hosted buyers events, you name it. There are many different things. And if you read the book, there are some good examples on that. But also they're monetizing buyers, which means buyers are paying annual memberships in order to be part of that community. It's not a lot of money. It's probably a couple $100. I don't care, because if they pay something, they will pay attention. They will go back to the platform. They will go to the webinar. They will go to the meeting. And when you have that connection where buyer is paying a little bit, seller is paying for annual and specific activations, that is becoming very, very important. And once you capture enough data, you can now decide, okay, let's do this show in Orlando and this show in Singapore, because that community is ready to meet face-to-face at that particular time, at that particular location.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I have to say, this has been such a wonderful conversation. I am curious, as somebody who has so much experience in going to multiple meetings, you still have to make the choice of how you're spending your time. And now there are more choices than ever on different types of meetings that you can go to, some of which you maybe never had the opportunity to attend before. So how does someone like yourself make a decision on which meetings you want to attend?
It's a great question, because time is my most valuable asset, which means I need to decide if I invest my time investing money and time with startups. That's my day job. And I also do some M&A when I can help sellers to meet the right buyer. And my focus is, if I go to this particular event or conference or meeting, and I start thinking, I need to fly. Okay, that means at least a couple of days. It's US, or I need to fly to Europe or Latin America or Asia. If it's Asia, it's probably 5 days, which means you start thinking, where is the return of investment of my time and money and opportunity cost as a speaker or as a potential meeting participant? I do that because I'm a pretty time-sensitive person, but I guess that many people now are going to be thinking, if it's just a keynote, do I really want to fly for a keynote? Or I will demand the organizer that the keynote is online, and I pay happy $200, $300, $500, you name it. If the content is valuable, education is relatively easy to provide through digital. Now, I see, and I can't name specific organizers because I'm working with them, but I see some organizers making real money on one-to-one meetings online. And that is fascinating for me, because I run hosted buyers events during my career. I know how much money brands are paying for hosted buyer events and meetings and whatever. If you curate the audience on the right way, that one-to-one meeting could be done online, and it's very efficient. You have, software providing you Blackboard, notes, video. There is a ton of technology to make the meeting very productive, and the meeting could be one-to-one or could be, 3-on-3, which means workshops online are extremely powerful and productive, which means there is a monetization opportunity on one-to-one meetings, creating the next generation of hosted buyer events. That I think that is very interesting. I talk about subscriptions on both ends, buyers and sellers. Education, I think that will be a very important opportunity with digital taking the lead. I see hybrid events, real hybrid events, because now everyone wants to be hybrid because it's cool, but there are very few real hybrid activations. But I was talking with a worldwide known brand that they're going to be running their event in Europe, but they're going to activate Sao Paulo, Singapore, and Vegas in parallel with streaming from a content perspective, but face-to-face small meetings on those locations. I'm fascinated to see that, because I believe that going back to the augmented time, I believe that there is a massive amount of people that they don't want to fly to that particular event, but they provide tremendous added value to that community. And now with this sort of technology and hybrid approach, we can capture that audience and include that audience as part of the community conversation.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, that was probably my favorite part of our entire discussion, was your answer to that last question. I think I'm going to clip it later. My editor's brain is already going into overdrive with that. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. I hope everyone will run out and order the book. I'm going to go ahead and put it up here. The link is up here, bit.ly link, but you can just go to your favorite online bookseller and plug in Reinventing Live. There is a Kindle version, I believe. Yes. If people want to go ahead and order it that way. And the hardback. And so please go and check that out. And then if people want to reach out to you, I know we have your Twitter handle and we have your LinkedIn address. Are those both the best ways to reach out to you?
Yes, that's the best way to reach out to me. And we have also a reinventinglive.com website that we created with the book and the content that we are adding into that, which means feel free to take a look. And as I said in the beginning, we did this book to open a conversation, which means ideally we want to hear from people disagreeing with us, having a different angle, or saying, you know what, this idea makes a lot of sense, let me build on top of that. And that's hopefully where we can add value to the industry and generate new opportunities and keep growing in a long and sustainable way as an industry.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And, I don't know about the rest of you, but I just absolutely loved learning from Marco during this discussion. And I have to say, I already appreciate the fact that we have the ability to attend so many more events virtually and in these new ways. But I'm excited to see what happens next, because I do believe that the advances that we're seeing in technology and the investment that's coming into the industry is incredible. So I guess hold on to your horses, hold on to the edge of your seats, pay attention, and definitely tune into Association Chat so that you can find out more about what happens next. As we always like to close out, I like to use this quote every single week. I go back and I bring it up, and I still love it as much today as I did from the very beginning. And that is, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. So go ahead. That's from Joseph Campbell. Go ahead and keep asking questions. All right. Talk to you next time.